Peter and Paul did not die on the same day, but they are celebrated on the same day. For Peter became our first pope, and Paul is in the Bible more than anyone else. He is our greatest teacher because he, in effect, wrote most of the New Testament. They both died in roughly the same year, circa 64 AD. St. Mark ends the first half of his Gospel with the triumphant climax. He has recorded doubt, misunderstanding, and the opposition of many to Jesus. But now Peter makes his great confession of faith. You are the Messiah. It was one of the many glorious moments in Peter's life, beginning with the day he was called from his nets along the Sea of Galilee to become a fisher of men for Christ. The New Testament clearly shows Peter as the leader of the apostles, chosen by Jesus to have a special relationship with him. With James and John, he was privileged to witness the transfiguration, the raising of the not quite dead child to life, and the agony in Gethsemane. Peter's mother-in-law was cured by Jesus. He was sent with John to prepare for the last Passover before Jesus' death, and his name is first on every list of the apostles. But to Peter, only did Jesus say, Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That was the alternative gospel today. I didn't use it because it's all written here. But the Gospels prove their trustworthiness by the unflattering details they include about Peter. He clearly was no PR person. It is a great comfort for us ordinary mortals to know that Peter also had his human weaknesses, especially in the presence of Christ. Peter generously gave up all things, yet he asks in a childish self-regard, what are we going to get for all this? He receives the full force of Christ's anger when he objects to the idea of a suffering Messiah. Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Peter is willing to accept Jesus' doctrine of forgiveness and love, but suggests a limit of 7 times to forgive someone. He walks on water in faith, but sinks in doubt. He swears at the Last Supper that he would never deny Jesus, then swears to the servant maid that he never knew the man. And in the depths of his sorrow, Jesus looks on him and forgives him, and he goes out and sheds bitter tears. But those 3 denials are balanced by the 3 times that the Christ asks Peter, do you love me? And charges him to feed his lambs and care for his sheep in the gospel we just read. Paul was the most well-known preacher in the world, would have the same effect if the most well-known preacher in the world today were to suddenly begin preaching that the United States should adopt Marxism, not rely on the Constitution. For the angry reaction would help us understand Paul's life when he started preaching that Christ alone can save us. He had been the Pharisaic of the Pharisees, the most legalistic of the Mosaic lawyers. Now, suddenly, he appears to other Jews as a heretical welcomer of Gentiles, a traitor, and an apostate. Paul's central conviction was simple and absolute. Only God can save humanity. No human effort, even the most scrupulous observance of law, can create a human good which can bring to God as reparation for sin and payment for grace. To be saved from itself, from sin, from the devil, and from death, humanity must open itself completely to the saving power of Jesus. Paul never lost his love for his Jewish family, though he carried on a lifelong debate with them about the uselessness of the law without Christ. He reminded the Gentiles that they were grafted on the parent stock of the Jews, who were still God's chosen people, the children of the promise. We would all probably go to confession to Peter sooner than to any of the other apostles. He is perhaps a more striking example of the simple fact of holiness. Jesus says to us, as he said in effect to Peter, "It is not you who have chosen me, but I who have chosen you." Peter, it is not human wisdom that makes it possible for you to believe, but my Father's revelation. I, not you, build my church. Paul's experience of the risen Christ on the road to Damascus was the driving force that made him one of the most zealous, dynamic, courageous ambassadors of the Christ the Church has ever seen. But persecution, humiliation, and weakness became his day-by-day carrying of the cross, material for further transformation. The dying Christ was in Paul. The living Christ was his life.